Hey everyone, it's Peter from Daydream Nation, and I've got back to the channel Stephen Schnee from the CD Junkie. Hello, sir,
Hello, Peter.
and hello, Bicyclelegs. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Peter.
We are going to talk about Icehouse, Iva Davies, or as was originally known as Flowers. We are going to pick our five favorite songs in order from five to one, and maybe at the end of the show, we'll throw in a couple of honorable mentions. So, Icehouse, huge band in Australia, new wave rock, pop. They had a little bit of impact in America for a period of time. According to Wikipedia, they've sold 9 million albums internationally, and about three or four of those million were in Australia. So they've had a couple of popularity waves in Australia, and Iva still plays to this very day, very strong. So I'll do it in order as I see it on the TV. I'll start off with you, Bicyclelegs. What is
Yeah.
your fifth favorite Icehouse song?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. And we're talking about Icehouse and Iva Davies, the man, the myth, the mullet. Um, I did impose one little rule on myself when making this list, just to sort of mix it up a little bit, because it's so easy to just choose songs from those first two Icehouse albums. So what I did was I limited myself to one pick per album. So, but there are great songs on all of their albums, so it wasn't that much of a limitation at all. And my number five, I'm going to go for something from the Man of Colors album, and the song is Nothing Too Serious. I just really, really love this song because it's really high energy, it's fast, the lyric is clever. I had a little accident, nothing too serious. I just, it's a light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek lyric, but the song is really driving. It has those cheesy synth horns that you got a lot in the 70s, in the 80s, sorry, but they work in this song. I really like them. Um, yeah, so that's my number five. Just a really all-up, kick-ass, fast-paced song, nothing too serious.
Yeah, I was just talking to my wife last night about this show, and she said she actually chose that as her favorite High South song. So there you go. Yeah, wonderful. Steve, what's your number five?
My number five is probably an odd pick. Uh, might not be on anybody's list here, but it is a song called Paradise Lost. It was a B-side. And it originally, the first time I heard it, it was I believe a 10-inch, might have been a UK single for Can't Help Myself. And it was one of the tracks on that. It has appeared on the remaster of the Flowers album. And it's pretty much an instrumental. And there's those songs that just a certain point of your life that, whether it's instrumental or vocal, whether it's mellow or fast, whatever, they hit you and they just grab onto you and just dig their claws and you cannot get rid of them. That is what this song did. And like I said, it's an obscure song that probably no one but the hardcore Icehouse fan would know, but there's just something about the mood and the melody and whatever was going on in my life at the time that has just made that a song that I whenever I think of Icehouse, that's one of the first songs that comes into my head. And it's just a wonderful, beautiful little track that had to go at had to go at number five.
No, that's a great track, and arguably should have made the album. So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, that album, did that make any impact in America? The Flowers, Icehouse, Icehouse Flowers.
It That's what the American album looked like.
Ooh,
And it did get like airplay on on things like KROQ, the alternative stations and stuff. The album is completely remixed.
Yep.
They brought the keyboards up, and I think it's a lot moodier. It's less rock oriented than the Flowers version of the album. But this is how I first heard them. I heard them because I was the fifth wheel on a double date. Story of my life. And we were going to this place to eat, two couples and me, whatever, and we're getting out of the car, and all of a sudden the song starts, and I'm going, whoa, hold on, what is this? And they're going, come on, let's go in and eat. And I had to make them wait until they back announced who it was. And it was a song called We Can Get Together from Icehouse. And my love affair with the band started at that exact moment and continues to this very day. And so they got airplay, but they didn't really catch on until really the Man of Colors album. That's
deep into the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And one more question before I take my choice, and this is to both you, Bicyclelegs and Steve. Do you think the Flowers name would have worked? Because there was a change of name, because I believe there was a Scottish band called Flowers. Do you think the name would have translated into America or overseas?
Hard to say.
Yeah, I think that here in America, there were so many bands with like a name like Icehouse kind of made it stand out because it wasn't this. And Flowers just seemed kind of like, maybe people would have thought like, oh, hippy dippy or whatever, because they're immediately gonna envision flowers. So that's, whereas the name Icehouse, I know that their music is not cold, but if you listen to, the first song on The American is the song Icehouse, and how it sort of builds up into that sort of, haunting little keyboard thing that you would think that, okay, this is the name of the band is closer to what you would imagine the group Icehouse would sound like.
Yeah.
It's probably got a stronger image in people's minds than Flowers.
I think it's
a bit more starker.
I think it's a name that definitely has more cut through than Flowers.
Cut through. Yeah. All right. Well, my number 5 is actually We Can Get Together, because that album, Flowers, Icehouse, is my number 1 album by them. That was the first album I grew up on, listening to Iva Davies. It straight off the bat wasn't a Bicyclelegs. It was a pretty huge hit. This album in Australia went to like number 5 and had a couple of top 10 singles. So there wasn't a slow build. It was like, bang. This band really just jumped out of the gates. What I like about this song is the guitar. It's spiky, it's angular, and Iva's really channeling his influences. So, Iva, he's got a bit of Lou Reed, he's got a bit of Bowie, Eno, Roxy music, Brian Ferry. It's all sort of channeled and filtered through this song. It's got a little bit of energy. It was a deserved top 5, and it's one that I just think sounds so fresh, because a lot of new wave, Steve, and Bicyclelegs sounds a little bit dated, but that early Icehouse, especially that album, Flowers by Icehouse, sounds contemporary now, especially with, there's a big movement at the moment called synthwave. It sounds really fresh. So that's my number 5, We Can Get Together.
Cameron Allen's production, I don't think was all that great, but that actually, in terms of the Flowers album, I think it helps it. Just like you're saying, because it sounds less of the 80s. And the American version of the album is a lot more 80s sounding. Now, it's not that radically different. I'm not saying this so people run out and buy the American version, but it is a substantial enough difference to where I don't know why, but I own 2 copies of this on CD because I love it so much. And I have to own the Flowers versions too. And I buy every remaster reissue that comes out. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it came out on CD. Then it was reissued with like 3 bonus tracks or whatever. Then it was reissued again with those 3 bonus tracks and an additional three bonus tracks. So I'm just waiting for another version. Oh, and then it also has a bonus disc and a bonus DVD. So I'm just waiting for like the box set to come out. Uh, you know, but yeah, it's wonderful, fantastic. But yes, I agree that the Australian version does sound a lot more fresh all these years later.
Yeah, I think it's a drier production, it
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of echo and reverb and all that sort of thing. And I think that's what makes it sound a little fresher. It doesn't
Yeah.
have those sort of dated tricks on it. I've got to say, Steve, I did not know that the American version of that album had been released on CD.
Yes. Like I said, I own 2 of them. Every time I find one for a decent price, I buy it. And then I've given them away and traded them and stuff because I love the album so much. I don't know
Cool.
why I have 2 copies though. I guess I think that, if like the nuclear holocaust comes, one of them might survive.
One more point is that Iva Davies owns the rights to his music. And I think the back catalogue of Icehouse has always been beautifully curated.
Yes.
So he doesn't sit on it. He turns it out and puts out new, fresh material. So that's an example of a band that really does look after their history.
Yeah.
All right. Bicyclelegs, what's your number 4?
Okay. My number 4 is going to come from this is the first Icehouse album I bought with my own money as a kid. The album is Sidewalk, and the song is Dusty Pages. I could have chosen a couple of songs from this album. I think, we'll get into that when we do the honorable mentions, but Dusty Pages, I've just always really loved this song. It has this kind of wistfulness to it. And it starts off, you think it's going to be a ballad, sort of the acoustic guitar and the way Iva's singing, but then it gets into quite an up-tempo kind of thing. It's a great song. As I say, the wistfulness for me is what really gets me with this song. It was, I think, the 3rd single off this album, and it did not chart very well. I think it got to like number 82 or something really, really low. But it's my favorite song on this album. And I love this album because, as I say, it was the first Icehouse album I owned. So I've always got a soft spot in my heart for this album. But yeah, my number 4 is Dusty Pages.
That's a great choice. I love his tonality on the voice where he says, it's over.
Yeah.
It's sort of a lot of emotion. That Icehouse album, that was like in Australia, there was a bit of a dip. Like Measure for Measure and Sidewalk didn't do so well. So Icehouse started off with a bang with Flowers and this album, Primitive Man, that was really high charting. But those middle 2 albums are kind of dipped. And then Man of Colours just exploded and became like the biggest selling Australian rock album of all time. I don't know if it's still the same, but it's just a bit of a head scratch because that album, Sidewalk, is just so strong. And that should have been a huge hit anyway.
Agreed.
All right, Steve.
Well, sticking with first album, I picked a B-side first. So, and of course, this was my gateway as well. So, I mean, we always have an affinity and a sort of a warm feeling about the gateway. But this time, I'm going to pick a lesser known track. I'm going to pick the song Boulevard, which it's, like the first, maybe minute of the song. I mean, you think it's an instrumental because like the music part, because usually they'll kick in with lyrics and stuff like that, maybe 15, 20 seconds into the song. It takes a while for him to start singing on this song, but the interplay with guitars and keyboards and melody and stuff, I totally dig it. And there's so many songs I could have chosen, from their catalog. I think we're all that way. But again, what are the songs that immediately come into mind that I'll hit play, and as soon as it's over, I'll just go back and listen to it again. And Paradise Lost was one of those, and so was Boulevard.
Oh, that's a great track. The deep cuts on that album are just outstanding, and yeah,
Mhm.
that's easily my favorite Icehouse album. So,
Mhm.
all right, well, my number four was a huge smash in Australia, and at the time, maybe I was a bit weary of it. You know, when you hear a song again and again and again, you become fatigued. But
Mhm.
over time, when there's space, you, I fell in love with this song all over again, like a new relationship. I'm talking about Icehouse Crazy. I can't deny it. Is it a guilty pleasure? I'm not sure. But that first kind of chiming chords, and then you got the silence with the keyboard, and you got the wonderful voice that I think Iva Davies is at his croontastic in this song, and he brings out his beautiful tenor, and it's got a lot of sweep. It's a lot of emotion. Maybe some people think it's cheesy, but it still sweeps me along, and I can understand why it charted really well around the world. And Steve, I was looking it up. I got surprised. It hit number 14. So Icehouse technically are not a one-hit wonder. They actually had a couple of hits, and this was the first one that sort of set things off.
Yeah, like I said, that Man of Colors album was, but I didn't hear this half as much as I heard like My Obsession or what else was on the album?
Electric Blue.
Yeah, Electric Blue. And in fact, I'm kind of surprised it hit number 14. I'm glad it did, but I didn't hear it nearly as much. But I heard, Electric Blue on the top 40, and then I heard, My Obsession on like K Rock and stuff like that. But, see, this record was a transition album for them. It was an album. I mean, in America, it was too commercial for new wave. I mean, all of a sudden, here's this great band that the radio stations like K Rock and stuff were keeping close to their hearts, and then all of a sudden they put out this record, which to me is not that much different than what they've done before, but it's just so much more commercial, so more refined and focused, and they became a top 40 sounding band, and maybe that's just because music at that time was shifting anyway. So I mean, by that time, you'd already had, the culture clubs of the world and all these other bands, making their way into the charts to where top 40 was now new wave and it was the post punk and the more odd and eclectic bands that were now occupying space on the alternative stations.
Yeah.
Sure, it wasn't the mullet. He did have one mighty mullet.
Oh,
Everyone, Steve, has got an aversion to mullets. It's been an ongoing conversation.
oh, I'll tell you, I don't know if Mike Score from Flock of Seagulls, if his wing hairstyle or Iva's mullet was worse. Either way, if I had a time machine, snip, snip, snips, I would go and cut that sucker off.
Yeah, but the
I
funny thing
love
is,
Iva, just not his mullet.
but Bicyclelegs can attest. But in Australia, it's kind of making a comeback with the youth, isn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. The mullet is on the return here in Australia.
So we'll just send it over to America, and
No,
you would book.
don't. Okay. First off, you may think I'm going to say, "Oh, don't do that." No, what I'm going to say is, don't think it's only Australia. Just today on CNN.com, there's an article about how mullets are making a comeback. So I'm growing my hair out a little bit here.
But the thing is, there's a twist to it. It's not the conventional symmetrical mullet. They're all sort of in right angles.
Yeah.
It's not the mullet that you and I remember. So you'll probably reminisce and go, "Oh, come back, Ivor. Oh, everything's all forgiven."
Well, what I'm thinking is just growing my hair a little bit and then having Peter on top, bicycle legs on the in the back.
Mate, I'm losing hair. I'll take anything I can. It's all right. It's all good. All righty. Over to you, Bicyclelegs. What's your number three?
Okay, my number three is from Measure for Measure, which again, I love this album. And it did a little better than Sidewalk, but it definitely Sidewalk and Measure for Measure were a dip. But this one did a little better. And the song I'm going to go for off this album is the closing track on the album, which is Baby You're So Strange. And the one, if I was going to sum this song up in one word, it would be swagger. This song has a real swagger to it. The music just, it's really hard not to get swept up with the swagger of this song and just how it goes along. And I love Iva's vocal on this song. It's really sort of, it's not his croon at all. It's much more his sort of straight ahead rock voice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, again, it was a single. It did okay. It wasn't as big as one or two of the other songs on this album, but I just love this song to death. And it's a wonderful way to close the album out. It kind of, the end of the song, music, like the instruments sort of go a little bit chaotic as it comes to an end, and Iva in his sort of best David Bowie voice just goes, "You're weird." I love it. It's great.
Yeah, I thought that
great.
I thought this was the album that Iva showed that. Well, I mean, Iva throughout his career, you know, like the one song that they took off of, or that didn't make it on the American version of the first album was "Nothing to Do," and that's very like Velvet Underground sounding. And you know, throughout his career, I'm not saying he copied anybody because every artist taking in all these influences. So you can hear bits of Bowie, Roxy music, stuff like that. But I think that Measure for Measure was the first album he was showing that he was capable with quite a few songs of being an AOR rocker.
Mm.
I mean, being a commercial stadium rocker, whereas before he sounded like, you know, hey, we're forever going to play mid-size venues and have top 40 singles, but we're not going to have the rockers, you know, fist pumping the air and stuff. But then on Measure for Measure, he had a few of those songs, you know, Baby You're So Strange, and then especially going on later, you know, especially on the Code Blue album, that was all AOR. And I you know, he's just he's a man of musical colors, just
Yeah.
constantly, you know, showing different sides, and I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, I think this song has a little bit of edge to it. That's what I
Mm.
like. And there's a little slight percentage of sneer, but it's a good sneer. It's sort of like, you know,
Yeah.
I love it. Should have been a big hit, but as I said, those two middle albums had a bit of a dip, and they didn't impact the charts in any shape or form, Steve.
See, here's the weird thing. First album comes out, like I said, it got airplay, you know, on the alternative stations. We Can Get Together, Can't Help Myself, and the title track of the first album. Second album got Hey Little Girl, and maybe Street Cafe. No, Street Cafe is on the other album.
No, it's on that one.
Okay, on Primitive Man. Okay.
Yes.
So something like that, you know, those got some airplay on those stations, but big, like even more so than those songs, we were hearing Taking the Town, and that was being played on K-Rock more than anything off of the previous two albums, apart from maybe Love and Motion and Hey Little Girl. So I'm surprised they took such a dip over there, because here they seem to be building up a little bit more momentum with maybe not so much the third album, but definitely Measure for Measure.
Yeah, no, definitely a little bit of a head scratch. But I'm just thinking Bicyclelegs, what was ruling the roost? Maybe it was the end of the new wave in Australia, and things were going into a little bit more of a harder direction, or, you know,
Yeah.
Excess, as an example, with Listen Like Thieves, the mid 80s, that sort of sound people were gravitating to, and a lot more pub rock.
Well, this was 1986 Measure for Measure. So you're starting to get into the hair metal thing and, you know, the pub rock thing, and it's definitely
pub rock
happening.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think you know, as you were saying, Iva was starting to head that way slowly, you know, starting to do more sort of rockers, more AOR, as Steve puts it. Um, but he wasn't quite there yet on this album. So,
Absolutely. Alrighty, Steve, what's your next pick?
My next pick, number 3, is was it your last pick? Crazy, off of Man of Colors. You guys, look, I have no guilty pleasures. I don't see that there's anything wrong with anything like Crazy or whatever. It may have got overplayed there, didn't get overplayed here. I mean, look, I still listen to Eagles Hotel California with glee. You know, I still listen to Journey, Don't Stop Believing with glee. Just, oh my gosh, this is awesome. You know, just like when I heard it, Crazy is a song, just like the other two, where I can, as soon as it's over, you know, you gotta be crazy, baby. Then I'll just hit play, then bang, bang, and bang, you know, right back into it again. And I love it. And I'll play the extended mix. I don't know if I have an extended mix with me handy. I don't know if there's yeah, I'm not sure if there's, yeah, you know, there's an extended mix on the you know, remix disc or whatever. And I think there's extended mixes on here too, like Moody, you know, but I just think it's a beautiful song, just absolutely, just super catchy. And whether or not he just tossed it out in like, oh, I need a hit here, bam, 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 and then threw it out there, you can't tell, because it does sound like he's really invested in it. And that's what I think an artist is always, they'll always raise a song that's really good to a great level when they sound really invested in it. And I think Crazy is just a wonderful song.
Yeah. Look, a great
Yeah.
song's a great song. I'll just
Yeah.
explain a little bit of the maybe the recorded critic snobbery in Australia about the views on Icehouse. There's a view, a narrative, that the first 2 albums are great and then Iva sold out. Everyone loves, you know, even the, you know, the NME reading melody maker type of folk, they love the first album, and then they think second album there was a dip, and then the rest of the catalogue they sold out. That's a narrative. Don't you agree, Bicyclelegs? There's a lot of critical, that seems to be a critical view.
yeah, that's definitely a narrative, and it's a grossly unfair narrative.
I disagree with it.
Yeah.
You know, maybe this is just my interpretation of it, but Flowers, Icehouse, that first album, they were a band. By Primitive Man, it was Iva and a few other people. It was Iva basically ruling it. And that might be a subconscious thing with critics. It's like, no, he ditched his band and then but then, you know, then for like 3, 4, 5 albums in the row, he had Andy Quinta and Bob Kretschmer or however you pronounce it. And he had Paul Wheeler on drums for a good portion. So he had a band. It just wasn't that same band on the first album. But this was a ship that Iva steered. And I don't know why. It's just beyond me. You know, it's not like there was a chemistry built up over decades and then the band split, you know. But I guess, you know, I mean, it's, you know, critics are going to be critics. We're critics too. It's just that we disagree with the ones that get paid for it.
That's so true. But there seems to be a common thing where bands become commercial or make it big, they sell out, which is not necessarily true. I bring it to its base level. A great song's a great song. So that's where it comes from.
That's what it's all about.
True. My next pick, Taking the Town. That's another song that's got a fair amount of swagger. I think he's channeling a little bit of Bowie, and I love it. It's got a bit of a groove to it. Again, it's kind of almost a little bit of a rave up. It's one that maybe if it was done in the 70s, people would be saying, this guy's a genius. But because it came out in the mid-80s, it sort of had a moderate sort of airplay and success. So I love the video clip. Everyone's having a lot of fun. I don't know how many drugs were imbibed during the making of that film clip, but yeah, I just think it's just wonderful. And I saw Icehouse in the day. I don't know if you've ever seen them, Steve, but I saw them a fair amount in the day, and they were really good, really tight. And they sort of, Ivor was able to put a really good song list that blended the old stuff and the new stuff perfectly, seamlessly. Because, sometimes you see bands where there's different styles and sort of jars. The band that he was taking out on the road seemed to, just really adapt to the material wonderfully. But
I was supposed to see them during the Measure for Measure tour. We had tickets, and I was supposed to drive, and that day, I had lost my right contact lens, and this is before this is when they were like hard and plastic. This is before like the disposable and everything, and spent hours looking for it. Finally found it, and we found it about a half hour after the concert started, and the concert was in L.A. It was like 45 minutes, an hour away, so I wasn't able to see him. That's the only opportunity I had, and I blew it.
yeah, Ivor still plays around in Australia and gets a fair crowd. Just dropping a question at you, Steve. If he landed in LA, do you think he could do a reasonable venue? Do you think people would remember him and see the band?
I think he could play places like he could would he pull in enough people to do the Palladium, which is not a huge place, but it's a kind of a large place. Maybe not, but I think there's so many. I don't know if it happens over there, but there's so many like 80s package tours. It may not be financial, worth it for him, but he can go on a tour with Thomas Dolby and China Crisis, or Thompson Twins, Tom Bailey, and Howard Jones. Have like 3 acts or 5 acts or 6 acts, and I'm sure that he'd stir up a lot of interest that way. But would it be worth it for him? I don't know. But he could probably pull in at least 500 to 1,500 people.
Like a small club type tour. Yeah. Well, I think you'd agree, Daniel. I don't think he'd ever go down that sort of 80s route, because in Australia he just goes out on his own and gets a fair following. So
yeah,
I don't think he'd be inclined to do that.
He's still playing, good size venues here and charging decent amounts for his tickets and the whole bit. So I don't think he'd want to maybe slum it's not the right word, but sort of take a step down and play those small clubs in the US and that sort of thing. I think he'd rather just do his Australian stuff where he's playing pretty good venues, sort of 3, 4, 5,000 seaters and that sort of thing.
He played in front of the Sydney Opera House recently in December, and I think he got a fair crowd.
Wow.
So it'd be 5,000, 6,000. So he's still got a bit of a following. And interesting, and this might be a good topic for another show, is that bands that are heritage in the 80s that get on these 80s shows, do they get stuck in a rut that they can't pop out? Because there's a lot of bands in the 80s like Tears for Fears, Duran Duran, that tour on their own and have never touched those sort of tours with a barge pole. So I think it'd be an interesting question. If he got caught up in that, it may be hard to get out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you see like a band like Big Country. Now they've only got 2 original members, Bruce Watson, the guitar player, and Mark, the drummer. And they do headline tours in the UK, but I don't think that they could draw enough people over here. So they'd have to get on a package tour. See, I don't see anything wrong with the package tours. The thing that I feel that is wrong is you're going to get somebody like China Crisis or Men Without Hats or Naked Eyes, all bands that I love. And you're going to get them and they're going to go on and play 3 songs and then they're gone. It's like, well, gosh, I'm sorry that I want to see China Crisis with both original members. They still tour. And I'd rather see them do a 8 to 10 song set minimum, overseeing Berlin, which only features Terry Nunn. I'm using that as Missing Persons. Over Missing Persons, Dale Bozzio's still in the band. I'd rather see her do a 3-song set and then have guys, but that's my preference. Other people are going to think opposite. And this is nothing against Dale Bozzio, but she lives here in America. You're bringing somebody from Australia or England or whatever. Give them a little bit more, time on stage, because you've got a 4-hour or 5-hour block maximum, and you've got 8 bands on the bill.
Yeah.
But I'm the only one who wants to see a full Wang Chung set, whereas other people just want to hear 2 songs and then off. I want to hear deep album cuts.
Well, my friend Wang Chung, I want to hear them play To Live and Die in LA. That's on my wish list.
Yeah.
The whole soundtrack.
Yeah, that would be great.
But is that going to ever happen?
No,
not likely.
Yeah.
All right, Daniel, what's your next pick?
All right, my number 2 is going to come from the Flowers album, Icehouse, and it is going to be the title track, Icehouse, which we've already talked about a little bit. It's a wonderful opening track to the album. It creates this great atmosphere, as Steve was talking about earlier. And we've talked a lot about Iva's influences, people like Lou Reed, David Bowie, Brian Ferry, all that sort of thing. The influence I get on this track, Gary Newman. This has got a real Gary Newman feel, especially the first half of the song. When the second half comes in and the drums kick in, it's more getting into that sort of Roxy kind of feel or that sort of thing. But the first half of it, to me, is pure Gary Newman with the vocal and the atmospheres and the There's No Love Inside the Icehouse. It's a very Gary Newman lyric to me. But I love this song. I love the way it kicks off the album. But, as Peter was saying earlier, you could pick almost any song on this album, I reckon, and it would be a valid pick for a top 5 Icehouse. This album is just so good. But, yeah, that's what I'm going with Icehouse, the title track.
Awesome.
It's such a strong album, isn't
it?
Yeah, it's mood, and again, it's my gateway into the band. But of course, that's a lot of people's gateway if they were listening to it back then. For us older gents, as opposed to Bicyclelegs, who's quite a few years younger, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was hearing these songs, I would have been, pre-teen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I was, hearing them on Countdown, which was our sort of, weekend music show on the ABC and that sort of thing. But as I say, it wasn't until Measure for Measure that I actually went out and bought an Icehouse album. So, I mean, sorry, Sidewalk.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting is on my live streams and videos on my channel, I've got a few of the Countdown girls or a few of the Countdown kids who visit my channel, and always, in the comments will or email or something like that, we'll always talk about all this groovy stuff that was happening back then with sports and In Excess and Icehouse and all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating because over here, these bands, they weren't getting the airplay or the TV exposure. And it's just so fascinating to hear about everything that happened over there. Because I'm a big fan of Australian music. I love Dear Enemy, Computer One.
Yeah, great song.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know any American that knows that song.
I only just played that song a week ago. I love it.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Yeah. In fact, so much so that I couldn't track down the Australian CD that had like the album and bonus tracks. So I bought a Russian gray area bootleg of the album just so I can have Computer One on CD.
Oh yeah, the CD version of that goes for big money on Discogs. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They were signed to Capitol, so they had a little bit of heat. again, Sam, I was surprised to see the label, Capitol.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it got released here, and the Computer One single or video got airplay over here, but the American version, of course, was a different mix than, or the American version of Computer One was a different mix than the Australian version. I'm a
yeah.
nerd.
No, you're not. Just very knowledgeable. Steve, what's your next pick?
Yes, my next pick. It's the first song I ever heard. We Can Get Together, and it's the American mix. I have to stress that. I love the Australian mix. The American mix, it takes out the dryness that we love so much about the Flowers version, and it also takes out some of the like there's a, I don't know, I can't really impersonate it, but there's like a together, like some weird pronunciation of it. It pulls that out of the mix. So I'm like, hey, all right, cool. Because when I heard the Australian version, I go, what the hell was that? Because it wasn't on the American version. But I love the song to death. That's just everything I love about pop music from that era. It's guitar, it's melodic, it's keyboard. It's just a great, great pop song. So We Can Get Together is my number two. And I don't mean number two in a a bad sense.
Great pick. My next song is off this album, Primitive Man, and it's Hey Little Girl. There's so much melancholy and sadness in this song, in a pop song. Pop's not just all about happiness and exuberance. Sometimes there are songs that just make you feel plain sad, but at the same time uplifting and rewarded. And just the lyrics of this song, where he's taking pity and being quite sympathetic to somebody on the wrong side of the tracks. And he's doing his very best. I mean, I think Brian Ferry would have woken up, turned on the radio, listened to this and go, hey, did I write this? He's really doing the Brian Ferry croon on this one, I love it. And it just never fails to affect me when I hear it. It just sweeps you in. And a lot of Iva's music is kind of he was a trained oboist in the Conservatorium of Music, so he's got a lot of classical game. And a lot of this album has a bit of symphonic sweep where he's really using that sort of knowledge, that classical training, and converting into pop bliss. So anyway, Hey Little Girl, it's full of melancholy, but I just never fail to get emotionally affected when I hear this song.
Again, he's connecting vocally with the song. It sounds like he is connected with everything about that song. And that's what I love about it.
Absolutely. And, I defy anybody to not connect with an opening lyric. Like, when everything goes wrong, sometimes it makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who hasn't been there?
Mm-hmm.
And he's used that lyric a bit, hasn't he? Where there's no sense at all. I'm sure that that's a regular theme. He's used the word sense as a very powerful word as a lyric.
Yeah.
Daniel, over to you.
All right. My number one, I apologize in advance because this is the most bog obvious choice, but I adored this song to death. It's off the Primitive Man album and it's Great Southern Land. It's one of those songs that has been here in Australia in particular, played to death, and I don't care. I could hear this song a million times and it wouldn't matter because it's just got such wonderful atmosphere to it. It's a song about Australia, but it's not jingoistic, it's not patriotic, but at the same time, it's not despairing and it's not, casting aspersions and all that sort of thing. It's kind of just painting a picture, a musical picture of Australia. And I absolutely love that about this song. And the keyboards in this song, you know, in the chorus, you know, he's singing Great Southern Land and you get that dee 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 dee. I love that to death. So, yeah, absolutely most obvious choice possible, but that is my favorite Icehouse song, Great Southern Land.
Is Great Southern Land sort of like Australia's version of Hotel California and Stairway to Heaven, where it's like, oh, not again? I mean, that's what everybody. I love hearing songs over and over again, but I don't listen to the radio, so I don't get bogged down by a lot of people say songs get overplayed. If it's a good song,
Yeah, I don't think there's any fatigue on that song. There are certain songs that people get fatigued. There's a couple of pseudo national anthems, and one of them is probably John Farnham, You're the Voice, which to a lot of people, like Bicyclelegs, get fatigued, but this one isn't. And it gets played at sporting events. It gets played on Australia Day parades. It just gets played everywhere, but it's sort of, yeah, I don't think there's any fatigue element
what about
whatsoever.
Ganga Jang's Sounds of Then?
I'd agree that's in the same category. That's a minor masterpiece. Probably, I wouldn't rate it as highly as that, but that's just, like a degree of separation.
Right.
But no, I don't think there's a lot of fatigue with that song either.
Okay.
Would you agree, Daniel?
Yeah. No, I don't think there's much fatigue with Sounds of Then at all. How can you get fatigued with that Reg Mombassa slide guitar? I mean, seriously,
Reg.
And the laconic, dry vocal delivery. And that was one song that wasn't really a hit in the day. It was the lower reaches of the chart, but it's sort of built and built and built and built. People were putting it in commercials, and now it's part of public consciousness. So I love those stories where songs, when they get released, don't do anything, but word of mouth, and it could be a movie or a commercial, and it just builds and people just accept it and love it.
Ganga Jang never got released here. Again, I might be the only American. Well, I'm not the only American, but I don't know anyone else who owns any Ganga Jang unless they heard it from me, then went out and bought it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Steve, so what's your number one?
Oh, we're already there, huh?
Business.
My number one. This was really hard between this and my number two, but my absolute favorite Icehouse song is No Promises, which is so absolutely moody and wonderful. Again, everything by Icehouse that I love, and that's quite a bit, are songs I can play over and over again and again and again in one sitting. No Promises is probably the one that has been played the most in one sitting. I probably listen to it 5 times in a row before I go, oh, lunchtime, and then come back and play it again. It's moody and that beautifully produced, and that na 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 na, it's super catchy. And I even love the 12-inch mix that's on here. It's not a typical 12-inch mix. It's one that kind of builds, starts off with just the rhythm or whatever. And then you hear, the keyboard riff. And as this extended mix goes, it builds and builds and builds until the song. And then it plays the song. And I love extended mixes that do that because it breaks down the track and rebuilds it. It's not, no promise. It's not like that. It's just this, wonderful thing. But No Promises will forever be my number one favorite Icehouse song.
Great song, swoon-tastic vocals.
Yeah.
I just made up a word there, folks. I'm not sure if there is a word called swoon-tastic, but it's swoon-tastic.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna get
One
a
of his
shirt
best.
made up.
Swoon-tastic.
Yeah.
I'll send it over.
Okay.
All right. Like Daniel, I'm going to be a bit predictable, but I've got to go Great Southern Land as well. It's just if ever a song was going to talk about the wide open spaces sonically of Australia, this is the song. It's just wonderful. And there's just so many little hooks in it. I can understand why it's become sort of like a pseudo second national anthem of Australia. It's one of the very rare songs that really sort of sums up the Australian psyche or describes what Australia is. Indigenous lands, the geography. There's only a few songs, like Sounds of Them would be one. Cattle and Cane, the go-betweens. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, Steve. But there's very few artists that sort of really sum up the psyche of Australia, and I think that's one of them, Great Southern Land. So, look, you wonderfully described the Bicyclelegs. I can't really add much more to that, but it is easily their number one.
You know, I just figured out both of you guys are Australian.
Yes.
No wonder.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, that's why.
All right, let's do a quick round of honourable mentions. Daniel, couple?
Yeah, look, off this album, off the Primitive Man album, Uniform, I think is a wonderful song. Another influence, showing my shirt today, it's got a bit of a Kraftwerk feel to it. It's definitely got that German krautrocky kind of feel to it. No Promises was almost my choice off Measure for Measure, other than Baby You're So Strange. Wonderful, wonderful song. I was almost going to pick Sister off this album because it's a really great, double tempo song. Taking this town off this one, the gang vocals on that, on the chorus, the nah, 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 nah.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. And the title track, Sidewalk. So they're just a few that I'll throw out there.
Good stuff. Steve, a couple of quick honourable mentions.
Well, Taking the Town up, someone like you's fantastic. Dusty Pages, as mentioned before. But then you've got, Great Southern Land, Uniform. I love those songs. What was really weird, okay, on the Australian version of the album, does Great Southern Land start off the vinyl LP?
Yes.
Because in America, Uniform was the first song.
Yeah.
Which is a very odd, but I love it. I love it to death. And of course, Street Cafe, Glam is great. Just as a mention here on Measure for Measure, wasn't top 40 or anything like that, but No Promises got a lot of airplay. But also so did Paradise and Spanish Gold and Cross the Border. And as I was showing there, if anybody wants to get a good Icehouse compilation, this is a good one. But I bought the one that was autographed by Iva.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and this has a DVD too. But just buy all the albums.
Yeah, look, you can still get that. It's recommended. And,
yeah, absolutely.
As I said, Icehouse, their catalogue is just wonderfully curated because Iva owns the rights and he just keeps it ticking along.
Yeah.
Quickly, a couple of my picks. Love and Motion with Chrissy Amplet version of the Divinals. She's got that sultry sort of tonality. It adds a little bit of shazba. I loved it. I also love Don't Believe Anymore. It's got the most wonderful bonkers sax solo. If anything, emotionally sears through a song, it's that sax solo in that song. Yeah. Actually, Iva puts that in his top 5. He did an article, an interview a couple of years ago, and that was one of his top 5 simply because of, I think, the sax solo.
That was Joe Camilleri, wasn't it?
Yes, I think. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But, well, there you go, guys. Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful show, just chatting Icehouse. You can see Bicyclelegs on his channel. Lots of great content. I'll put the link. And Mr. Stephen Schnee, always a pleasure to have you on the show. The CD Junkie, just lots of great shows and also live shows like the Ski Lodge. Different type of genre of music. I will put the link down and everyone can check that out. But
I thought we were going to talk all day about Icehouse. I've still got a few hours. You guys want to continue?
Well, please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Click on the bell. But one thing's for certain, you'll see us lads will be talking about something or other throughout the course of 2024. Wonderful to have you gents on the channel. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.